Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Always in Season podcast, episode number 10. This week we're kind of just gonna go through like ownership, GMs, head coaches, and kind of just the top five for this upcoming year.
Yeah, first we'll do some weekly news though. Dolphins signed safety Marcus May. That's a good veteran presence to add.
Yeah, I mean, Dolphins kind of need that veteran presence, and it's kind of a shock because I feel like he's just been kind of under the radar. But yeah, solid move for the Dolphins, I feel.
For sure. Mike Tomlin, 3-year contract extension. I mean,
Yeah,
the picture was going around of him 17 years ago with the same agent, like signing the same contract. Like that's just so cool.
yeah, I mean, Steelers would be dumb to get rid of him. I think there was like some brief talk last year of like, oh, do they move on? And it was like, no, they can't move on from him.
He,
With Belichick gone, he's, in my opinion, he's up there.
yeah, he's one of the greats, and I mean they're always having success,
Right.
even no matter what their team looks like. Darren Waller officially retired last week. We talked about that it was expected, and he officially retired. Shared a little bit about why. Thought at some points last season that he might be dying, like he was going through it
Yeah.
mentally, physically. So, props to him on a great career, and it's
Yeah.
smart to put his mental
Right.
health
Right.
first.
Definitely.
Seahawks signed quarterback PJ Walker, so he's been kind of bouncing around, but he's been a solid backup.
Yeah. Seahawks kind of they're figuring out their quarterback situation, I think, right now. And again, PJ Walker, I think, is a guy that could see some time, especially if he does well in training camp.
For sure. Damian Harris, he kind of talked about Bill Belichick. Kind of went in on him
Yeah.
about how he handled the whole Mac Jones situation. He really felt that Mac Jones was not given a fair shot in New England, and that they did not build around him. And he was basically saying that Bill, it was like his way. Nobody else could like tell him any
Yeah.
opinions, and that was just kind of interesting to hear.
I don't know. It's weird because like obviously with Belichick and Brady, they had their way of doing it, and I think Belichick was kind of more, I would say, harsh on Mac. But
Mhm.
Mac's just it's a tough situation because he really kind of wasn't given a fair shot. He had that 1 year, and then Bailey Zappi came in, and it was just kind of like he just fizzled out essentially.
Yeah, I mean, he was a Pro Bowler that 1 year too,
Right.
and then yeah, so I mean, he's in Jacksonville now,
Hmm.
right? Backing up Trevor Lawrence, so we'll see where he goes from there. The Lions violated league practice rules, and they admitted that they did, so now they're going to lose a practice. That's kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, that's not really something you hear about. I mean, and like you said, they admitted it, but losing a practice is, especially this early on, it can be tough.
Yeah, for sure. Sterling Shepard, 1 year deal with the Bucks, just a nice little pickup for them.
Yeah, Bucks. I mean, they have Mike Evans, but it's like they need help. So I think 1 year, 1 year deal. Just another target for Baker, but I think a solid deal for them.
And I think Sterling Shepard will do well with the change, like of a
Yeah.
new team. Xavier Howard, he did something pretty messed up,
Yeah.
inappropriate, and he's a free agent right now. Um, this might have cost him his
Yeah.
career in the NFL as well as gotten him some legal trouble,
Yeah.
and it's too bad. He was a great player.
Yeah. I think. I mean, there's a lot of like you see it all with the gambling things and this and that. We won't get into like what he did. You guys can look into that yourselves. But yeah, I think it did kind of it cost him for sure this season, and depending on the legal troubles, he could be done.
Yeah. Chiefs lineman B.J. Thompson, he had a seizure and went into cardiac arrest. The Chiefs canceled practice that day. Sounds like he's doing better, but that's a really scary situation.
Yeah, I believe Harrison Bucker was the one that came in and got the training staff, and just another great move by Harrison Bucker. I think there was some again mixed opinions on Bucker. They're like, oh, he really didn't do anything, and like he got the training staff. But
Mhm.
again, props to him. Hopefully, BJ Thompson does well and can play this year.
Yeah,
You know?
for sure. Chiefs also re-signed McCole Hardman to a 1 year deal. Obviously, that's a good player to
Yeah.
keep around for
Mhm.
them. And he wanted to be there. So
Yeah, I mean, not. I mean, who wouldn't want to play with Mahomes? I think, and again, one of his top targets, especially with Tyreek gone for the now couple years. I mean, he still has Kelsey, but McColl's shown that he can be a solid target for Mahomes.
isn't it wild that Kelsey's going into his 12th year?
Yeah, I mean, there was some talk about like maybe slowing down and maybe retiring, but I think as long as he's dating Taylor Swift, he'll be in the league.
You know who's not retiring is Mercedes Lewis. He's going into his 19th year, re-signed with the Bears. That man just will not stop.
He's 40. I mean, 1 year deal, so I would assume this is it, but I don't know.
I want him to hit 20 years. Who ends at 19, you guys?
Yeah, 20 years, but I think he'll be 40. I think you don't see that for anybody other than quarterbacks, really.
Yeah, there was some list I saw about players receiving yards
Yep.
after 40, and it's an interesting list. You should go look it up. But
Yeah.
Mercedes is probably going to get to number 2
Yeah.
after this
Right.
season. Um, Jamar Chase, who is looking for a new deal or a new contract, wasn't at OTAs, but he is at mandatory minicamp, and that's really good news for the Bengals.
Yeah, it is. I think with Burrow back, and I'm sure Burrow had some conversations and talks with him, but I don't know. I was kind of shocked. I just thought, with all the holdouts, Jefferson got paid, CD's holding out. So it'll be interesting to see if negotiations start to ramp up now that he's showing he's going to be there.
Yeah, good for him. I really respect that move. T. Higgins, he did not get he did not get a new contract, and he also wanted to. He was not at OTAs. He is not at mandatory minicamp, but he will not be subject to fines. So
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because you have two guys, two receivers. Jamar's better. He just is. So Jamar is going to get paid more and probably before T. Higgins. So I don't know what's going to happen with T. Higgins. I think he could maybe go somewhere else, but it's still early on and he's not getting fined yet. So
yeah, it's an interesting situation. Meanwhile, Aaron Rodgers, he had been at OTAs. He is not at mandatory minicamp. Unexcused absence, and it is subject to fines. Coach Robert Saleh said that he is at an event that is important to him. What do you make of that?
I don't know. Football should be his top priority right now. He says he has a lot to prove, still has some left in the tank, but I think we've seen this for at least the past 5-6 years. He just doesn't show up to OTAs, mini camp. He doesn't care if he gets fined. So I just don't know. I feel like he got away with a lot in Green Bay because he was there for so long. He was great, and with the Jets, it's kind of like you played 4 snaps. You haven't obviously you're great, but you haven't proven anything.
And here's the interesting thing is that when Rodgers was in Green Bay, like you said, he wasn't showing up those last couple of years that he was here. Now that Jordan Love is there, he's been showing up, and the players and the coaches are saying how important that is. Matt LaFleur said that when your quarterback shows up, everybody else wants to show up. They had full participation, in something that's optional. Jair Alexander showing up, these great guys showing up. So when your quarterback isn't showing up, especially for something that's mandatory, that's kind of trickles down to the whole team.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that compared to with Love, like we talked about last episode. He hasn't gotten paid yet. He kind of has every right to be like, let's wait till I get paid. But he's there. I think they were all there basically for OTAs. Mandatory camp started today for them. I think they have some other guys helping out. I saw Mike Daniels was there, so they just seem so together. It's great to see. And then just kind of Rodgers is still doing what he's been doing.
Yeah, but like we said, Aaron Rodgers was at OTA, so I don't think it's like him giving a middle finger to the team. It's just where's his priorities right now. Hassan Reddick is also not at mandatory minicamp. Wasn't announced yet if he was subject to fines. He probably will be. I don't know why he's not there. Wasn't said.
I mean, you see veterans kind of around the league. They just kind of don't show up to camp. Maybe they just don't think it's important. But again, I don't see the need for it or why you do it. But again, some guys just feel like they don't need to be there.
And the interesting thing, a lot of guys, they have their own personal trainers for the off season, and they feel that those programs are better than what they can get in OTAs or mandatory minicamp. So they're like, we're just going to do that. But then it's there's also the team chemistry, that building, the leadership. So I'm all for you should show up for your team. You should show up there. But yeah, Hassan Reddick is not there. Last but not least, CJ Stroud. He's been talking a lot.
He has. I think a guy that we both like, great year last year. But he definitely had some words. I was asked about whose career he would have, Eli Manning or Aaron Rodgers, and he went with Eli. So
he said 2 rings, which valid. Now, on the other side, Rodgers has 4 MVPs. Eli, when he retired, he has a 500 record of wins and losses. I mean, Eli's a Hall of Famer. when you win two Super Bowls. Are you done on that? Because that is a question that some people
James
ask.
Jones pointed out, he goes, you look at Rodgers,
Mm-hmm.
that guy, he's going to walk into the Hall of Fame. And yes, Eli, because he has two Super Bowls, he's going to get there. But
Against
it's like
Brady.
without, if he only has one, then it's like, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, you just look at Rodgers' stats, his touchdown to interception ratio is just ridiculous.
Pro Bowls.
Pro Bowls, yeah, like you said, MVPs, Eli
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have one.
Yeah.
Um, it's just, I don't know.
And this is no disrespect to Eli Manning at
No.
all, but C.J. Stroud just kind of threw it out there as if it was obvious that you take Eli's career
Yeah.
just because of the rings. I mean,
But then you kind of look at his Super Bowls. It's like you have the helmet catch, which arguably won him that they won them that Super Bowl. But again, Rodgers again he only has one, and it sucks he only has one. But
he should have more.
he should have more. But again, you look at the stats. Um, like like I said, touchdown interception ratio, MVPs, what he's done, and he just has kept Green Bay relatively good since he's been there. And obviously, last year with the Jets, not much, but yeah, CJ Stroud, again, he's getting a little confident.
Yeah, another thing he said, and I'm going to pull up the quote just so I don't misquote him. He said, if you gave Matthew Stafford a chance like Aaron Rodgers had, I guarantee you he might have more rings for sure. Now, his English there really tripped. That's what tripped me up because he said, I guarantee you he might have rings for sure. So that did not make sense. If you're going to make a bold statement, you got to go all the way with it. I don't necessarily disagree with him. I think Matthew Stafford could have had more rings than Rodgers if he was given the same situation. I think you could make that argument, but it was kind of it's like he's taking shots at Rodgers. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to say.
But then, I mean, I believe a couple years ago when Brady was still in the league, I think he even admitted that if you put Rodgers on that Patriots team, I think Rodgers is firmly in the GOAT conversation because I think as far as talent goes, Rodgers is better than Brady, but Brady was just that system with the Patriots was just nobody could stop it, and it's why Brady has so many rings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brady was a legend, and they also they knew how to get it done in New England, and that's kind of what it seems to be looking at with the Chiefs right now. That they just know how to win no matter what players they have, no matter what the season is going. Like regular season in the playoffs, they're just dominant.
Right.
So. Yeah, so that's it for the weekly news. We're going to move in, like last week, we did top 5 of players. This week, we're going to do owners, coaches, and GMs, and then we're going to have some fun Mahomes talk, so stay tuned. Alright, so now we're going to get into our top 5 owners, GMs, and head coaches. We will kick it off with owners. Who's your number 5?
My 5 is Jerry Jones. Obviously, they haven't been to the NFC Championship since '95. Jerry Jones bought the team in '89, and then he had that dynasty early in the '90s. I think that's a big reason why he's still number 5. He won Super Bowls in '92, '93, and '95. And not only that, but he did help with the financial success as far as TV rights go. He did help move the Rams and the Chargers to LA, which is obviously like those fans don't like that, but it's good for the market, good for bringing money in. And I just, it is I would say a destination, but like players want to go there. But again, it's a situation where it's like, how come you haven't been back yet? So I think that's why he's so low. He was borderline on my list, but I just think having the success in the early '90s, you can't really ignore that.
Yeah, and that's fair. And Jerry Jones didn't make my list. Now, the owners, it is tricky because for a lot of them, they have been there for a long time, as opposed to like GMs or coaches where it's such a finite amount of time that you're having to, rank them by. But Jerry Jones didn't make my list just because of recently they haven't had success. You always like if you're trying to like joke with Cowboys fans, like, well, what have you done since the '90s? Do you enjoy watching Super Bowls on VHS tapes? Because they haven't done much. So I think personally, I say that Jerry Jones is the reason they haven't won a Super Bowl since. Like that's who I blame. But he has done a lot in his career as the owner, which makes sense. At number 5, I have Clark Hunt of the Chiefs. Obviously they've had recent success, and also they were in it like beforehand, like before this dynasty has started. But just from the recent success, I think you have to have him on your list, or I think it's a good argument to have him on your list.
Yeah, I mean, just like the Hunt family in general, but I think Clark Hunt took over in 2006. But like you said, the recent success is kind of what pops out on you, and kind of they were kind of mediocre before then, but um, they've hit a home run at least in the past 5 years.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're keeping, Brett Veach around as GM and
Hmm.
Andy Reid as head coach, and then you got Mahomes, like, I mean, if you're keeping all those guys, you got
Yeah,
your big three, then I think you can
yeah.
say you've done a good job.
My number four was Jeffrey Lurie of the Eagles. He bought the team in '94. He has 9 division titles since then. They have the Super Bowl from 2017. And the big one was he got Howie Roseman. I think Howie Roseman is, especially this year, he had a phenomenal draft
Mm-hmm.
and just seems to hit a home run every year and just find these guys in free agency, and um, they've just been solid since. I think they've kind of been at the top of the NFC East for a while. And I think with Jalen Hurts and just kind of that core there, I think they'll be in contention at least for the next couple of years.
For my number four, I have Steve Biscotti of the Ravens. If you look at his history, he just always seems to do the right
Mm,
thing. Now, obviously, you wish that they had more rings. I think they're always in the running though, and I think that's an
yeah.
important thing to keep in mind. It's kind of similar to like teams like Green Bay, where even if they're not winning, they're always right there.
Yep.
And I think you want to always be in that conversation, always com- be
Hmm.
able to be competing for
Yeah.
that big game, and he's done a good job of keeping that team. And they just have like a really solid organization. There's not the drama around them, and I think
Hmm.
that's huge. Um, and they've also recently invested in their facility a little bit more.
My number three was just the Hunt family, like, I guess Clark Hunt of the Chiefs. He took over in 2006, like I said. He got Andy Reid in 2013, and they've had 10 straight winning seasons since. Seven consecutive AFC West titles, which is ridiculous. And then he got Brett Veach in 2017. That's when they got Mahomes. And then they have 3 Super Bowls and 6 AFC Championship appearances. They've just been running the NFL for almost the past decade. I think it's kind of hard to ignore the success, and I think as if you're not a Chiefs fan, you're just kind of sick of it.
Yeah,
But you can't really ignore what they've done at least recently since they've gotten Mahomes.
for sure. At number three, I have Stephen Ross of the Miami Dolphins. He was ranked by NFLPA as the number one owner based on willingness to upgrade the facility and kind of like listen to the players,
Mm-hmm.
listen to the opinions, and really help bring people to want to come to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Like free agents. I mean, we saw like Tyreek Hill. He went
Mm-hmm.
to Miami. Jalen Ramsey. Like so, obviously players are wanting to go there. Miami already is a spot that you want to play in,
Mm-hmm.
and when you play for somewhere that's popular like
Yeah.
LA or New York, Miami, you have to make sure you're making your sports team
Mm-hmm.
an attraction, no matter if you're winning Super Bowls or not. And he's done a great job at that. He didn't make my number one like the NFLPA, but number three is respectable.
My number two was Art Rooney of the Steelers. He took over in 2003. They won Super Bowls in 2005 and 2008. His biggest, I guess, biggest signs or whatever were Kevin Colbert, the GM, and then Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin has just been a winner since he's been there. Just a model of consistency since he's been there. Um, Again, you don't obviously haven't won Super Bowls since the early 2000s, but they're good every year.
Yeah.
They're competing every year. They have the defense that seem to get better every year. This year again with Russell Wilson, we'll see what happens. But I think just a guy that has proven that he doesn't really know what losing looks like.
Yeah, that's very true. At number two, I have Jeffrey Lurie of the Eagles. You already kind of mentioned the success he's had, and like you said, bringing in Howie Roseman was a big deal, and I'll get into that more when we talk about general managers. Um, but Jeffrey Lurie, I mean, he has done so much for the Eagles, especially in recent years,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that he kind of flies under the radar now. When they had won the Super Bowl, a few years back, people were really praising him. Now that it's been a little drought, that's just kind of what
Yeah.
happens. Then you start getting talked about less. But I mean, if they get back to that big game, then he has to be up there right
Right.
again.
My number one was Robert Kraft, the Patriots. Obviously, now that Brady's gone, it's kind of like been up and down,
Mm-hmm.
but took over in '94 and 6 Super Bowls since. Had the Brady Belichick that kind of is doing what the Chiefs are doing right now. just dominant every year. A 33-16 playoff record, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I think you kind of well, I think we're going to kind of see what the Patriots look like now. It's a new era there. But you can't really ignore what they did early on with Brady there.
Yeah, I also have Robert Kraft at number one, with an asterisk, but which I'll get into in a minute. But I think also about Robert Kraft, the players really felt like they could go to him. He's very
Mm-hmm.
personable. Where a lot of players with a lot of teams, they don't always feel like they can go to the
Yeah.
owner, and that's a huge thing. Or like they joke about like I haven't seen him since I got
Right.
drafted. I haven't talked to him since I got drafted, and like Robert Kraft is never that. He's always
Yeah.
around the team. He loves being around the team. I think you could probably say the same about Jerry Jones.
Yeah.
Like they're just so into the
Yeah.
game, into these players, and that's huge. When you feel like you have a personal connection with the man up top, I mean,
It goes a long way.
it goes a long way. Now, I put an asterisk there because I think the best situation, especially for GMs and coaches, but also players, is to not have an owner, which the Green Bay Packers do not.
Mm-hmm.
They have the fans as the owners. They have President Mark Murphy who like goes to the ownership meetings, in place of, as opposed to
Yeah.
bringing thousands of fans. But I think that's the best situation, and I think it's so special, especially because, like we talked about a few episodes ago with the draft coming to Green Bay, Lambeau is in the town. Like
Yeah.
it's in a neighborhood. That just is unheard of, and this is really, if you come here for a game, you really do realize that this is the
Yeah.
fans team. So
Yeah, I just think it just brings that connection to like with the team and the players. But like you said, it's just not having that owner that's like, in charge of everything.
mhm.
And I think what's unique is that if they need to make upgrades or anything, they just will put out more I guess ownership so people can buy so more people can become owners. So it's a unique way. I think it's just the best way for players to connect to the team and the fans. But like you said, it's in the neighborhood, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's a different situation, and it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But I just think just the community here is just something special.
Yeah. And I will put it out there. I am an owner, so I
Yeah.
kind of put myself at the top
Yeah,
of the list.
okay.
But now we want to move up to general managers.
Yeah, GMs. My number 5 was Brad Holmes of the Lions. He jumped up to the list quickly. Obviously, he hired Dan Campbell, which was just a phenomenal hire right away. Obviously, they had the bad year, but quickly turned it around. And then they traded Stafford to start the rebuild, which was kind of good for both sides. I feel. But like I said, I think they had the one season where they won one or two games, and then almost immediately they just flipped like overnight. It looked like they flipped into contenders.
I also had Brad Holmes at number five, actually. And I think one of the biggest things, like hiring Dan Campbell, I think just the culture change that they have done for the
Yeah.
Lions has been huge, and the city is all behind it. And I feel like even if like the Lions have high expectations this year because they almost got to the big game last year,
Mhm.
but I think even if the Lions don't make the Super Bowl, even if they make the playoffs and exit the first round, I feel like the Lions fans are still going to be so behind this team and so
Yeah.
energetic and so hopeful for the future. And Brad Holmes is a big part of that.
My number 4 was Brian Gutekunst of the Packers. The bigger thing I had was he pulled the trigger at the right time for Rodgers. He wasn't early, he wasn't late. He got a couple of solid years out of Rodgers after he drafted Love. I think his best draft came not this past one, but the year before. I think he missed like once maybe, and I think the eighth round. But I think all the weapons he drafted last year with Wicks, Reed, Musgrave, Kraft, all those guys. And then he's shown that he's wanting to build around Love quickly, and I think he feel like he might have dropped the ball a little bit with Love with Rodgers later on, not putting the weapons around him, and he's not going to make that same mistake. And then on top of that, the youngest roster and the seventh most cap space is almost ideal for that team right now.
At number four, I have Howie Roseman of the Eagles. And one of my favorite things about Howie Roseman is that a lot of teams, when they win a Super Bowl with a coach and with a player, they never let go of them. And honestly, when the Packers won with Rodgers and McCarthy, they held on to both of them for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think if they hadn't gotten that ring, even if they kept getting winning, I don't think they would have done that. Howie Roseman with the Eagles, I mean, who was their quarterback? It was Carson Wentz slash Nick Foles,
Mhm.
And then they had Doug Peterson. When it was a very short amount of time after winning that he said, you know what, see ya, see ya,
Yeah.
see ya. We're moving on
Yeah.
because I want to make sure we're getting back to that big game right now. Thank you for what you did, but we got Jalen Hurts now, we got Nick Sirianni, and they're going at it and they're having success.
Yeah.
Like I think you have to have some guts to do
Yeah.
that, and he got some hate, about those, but look at what it's doing.
Yeah.
And a GM, you need a GM who's not afraid to do the right thing, no matter
Yeah.
what everyone else is saying. And Howie Roseman is one of those
Yeah,
guys.
I think you put it perfectly with the McCarthy. I think you saw. I think the breakup between those two, McCarthy and Rodgers, was just it boiled to the point where there was no fixing it. And I think if they would have got out of it a little bit earlier, it would have been different. But I do think that you kind of see it in the NBA a lot that coaches I feel like they leave their teams quicker than the NFL. And then some obviously like some cases with Tomlin and Reed, you can't let them go just because of how great they are. But like you said, it takes a lot to get rid of a coach when you need to.
For sure.
My number 3 was John Lynch with the 49ers. The biggest one was he found Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. Arguably the most complete roster in the NFL. He's built contenders every year, and just I think a guy that you see on the sidelines every game, every week. He's there. Um, but yeah, I think a guy that just kind of has built the Niners into somewhat of a powerhouse.
Number 3, I have Eric DeCosta of the Ravens. He has such a great relationship with head coach John Harbaugh, and that is huge when the GM is listening to the coach and what the coach thinks is best. Where when there's GMs out there who they're just gonna do what they want and what they think is best, and
Yeah.
not necessarily listen to the coach, then they don't necessarily last longer. The relationship boils over. And also, like I talked about when we were talking about their owner, is that they've just had this continued success. You always know that they're gonna be
Mhm.
there when you're doing your playoff predictions. You always have the Ravens in the mix. You know,
Yeah.
they have a tough division, and he's always making that team tougher. I think they've done a good job in this past draft, and he did find Lamar, and Lamar MVP,
Hmm.
one of the rare talents in the league.
Right.
He's great at throwing. If you guys want to argue with me with that, I will
Yeah.
I will go to battle for Lamar.
Yeah.
Lamar is a great thrower of the football, but he also can run
Yeah.
like a madman, and it's incredible. He found him, but he's also keeping John Harbaugh around. He's a great coach.
All right, for my number 2, I had Brett Veach of the Chiefs. Obviously, he got Mahomes, but I think the biggest one was he traded Tyreek for 5 draft picks, which just a haul for a guy that seemed to be, clearly Mahomes number 1. But again, I think a big thing is he's not afraid to let big names go like Orlando Brown and Tyrann Mathieu. It's kind of hard to let Pro Bowl caliber players go, but he did that and it worked out for him.
For sure. Number 2, I have Brian Gutekunst to the Packers. I think he's clearly one of the best GMs. I think he's been getting a little bit more credit as time's going on. People were calling for his head when he drafted Jordan Love, and look at how that turned out.
Yeah.
It turned out to be the right move. And the big thing, especially about of all my top 5, but mostly my top 4, is that when you're not afraid to do the right thing, because you can't just you should listen to your coaches. You should listen to your staff. But if you're listening to all these outside opinions, and letting that influence, he does not. He does not care. Everyone told him so many years in a row, you need to draft a number 1 wide receiver. He never drafted a first-round wide receiver, and he did not care. And now people are saying that they might have one of the best receiving cores there are, and you barely have to pay any of them. It's a really great situation, and Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst have a great relationship. Brian Gutekunst also does a really good job of having a good relationship with the players where they're open to come to him, but we still know who's in charge, and that's also important. So Brian Gutekunst is my number 2.
My number 1 is Howie Roseman of the Eagles. Like I mentioned earlier, just hits on the draft seems to be every year. Drafted guys like Jalen, Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson, and Jordan Mailata, and then he goes out and he gets guys like A.J. Brown, Javon Hargrave, and Darius Slay to just help build that roster. And very much like the Niners kind of built a solid roster and a guy that just knows how to win and has built the team around Jalen. And I think, like you said, he's not afraid to let coaches go when need be, and just is always looking to improve.
Absolutely. At my number 1, I do have Brett Veach of the Chiefs. Clearly, the recent success is impressive. And like you said about letting big names go that you can feel comfortable letting go, but he's not letting a guy like Travis Kelsey go where he knows he's got to keep him around, you know? And obviously, Andy Reid, he's, staying there with him and they just have a great relationship. And I just think that having that relationship, like, you can just really tell how important that is. And Brett Veach has done a lot recently for the community as well. And they also do a lot of cool, like, volunteer, or like where they go out in the community and help build that community. I just think that's really important, showing that they're not too big for the fans. And so yeah, Brett Veach is my number one right now.
All right, let's move into head coaches now. I have Sean McVay at number 5, a guy that players love to play for, has a phenomenal offense, even with an older Stafford. We'll see how they do this year, especially with Stafford getting, again, older. But you have guys like Puka and other younger guys that can, hopefully will take a step. They lost Aaron Donald last year, which kind of sucks, but they were rebuilding and they still went 10-7. So I think they're going to be competitive, and we'll see how they look. Even I'm curious to see how they look once Stafford leaves.
For sure. I went back and forth on this one, but I did put Dan Campbell at number 5 for the Lions. I think when you have a coach that is confident in the team, no matter what the team's looking like, no matter what the outside opinions are, that's really important. And like, I don't mean just confident in their own locker room, but confident, to the media, And he just brings this energy. He really changed the culture. He gave the fans something to be excited about. From that interview of biting kneecaps off, like just the grit that he has, his personality, it's huge. Like I talked about last week, I really believe he is the face of this franchise. He is the Detroit Lions. I love everything he represents. And I think they're an up and coming team.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Dan Campbell also does a great job of developing these young players and also helping build the chemistry between the players who are, older veterans and the young guys. So he's number 5 for me.
My number 4 was Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. 3 straight 13-win seasons. A lot of people said that was because of Rodgers. But last year, he kind of showed with that young team what his offense looks like. The biggest thing was he kind of let Love be Love when, about halfway through the season, he kind of I wouldn't say held his hand, but he just kind of held him back a little bit. And then he kind of let him go and he shined. But they went to Dallas last year with the youngest roster. He had them ready to play, and they blew out Dallas at home.
Yep.
I think the biggest thing is his locker room presence.
Yeah.
Those guys are as connected as I've seen a locker room in a long time, especially in Green Bay.
Yeah.
And LaFleur is a younger coach that kind of can relate to the players, and I think that's a big reason why he's number 4.
Yeah, I also have Matt LaFleur at number 4. Like you said, the way he connects to the players, and Jordan Love actually just said this past week that like everybody loves Matt. Everybody loves his energy. One thing that I think a lot of people don't necessarily talk about is how the head coaches, deal with their assistant coaches and what do they let them do. Now, like Damian Harris seemed to be saying about Bill Belichick, it seemed like it was like Bill's way, like it was Bill's way for everything. He had trusted Josh McDaniels, but then once they got rid of him, it was just like Bill's deciding everything.
Right.
For Matt LaFleur, he hires somebody that he trusts, and he's gonna let him do his job. Obviously, he is in all the meetings, which I think is great. Matt LaFleur is in every single meeting that he possibly can be, but he lets the other assistant coaches do their jobs. He has that confidence in them, which then gives Matt also the ability to just focus on his job. Also, like you said, dealing with the youngest offense, that is difficult to deal with, especially with a new quarterback, but they did a great job. Like you said, they completely blew out Dallas. They also beat handily some other teams along the stretch, and they, beat the Chiefs. Like, they did a really good job, especially that second half of the season. Part of it, I do think, was letting Jordan Love kind of be free, but also the receivers finally knew the playbook. They weren't running the same routes,
Yeah.
And that team is really shining. And I think the number one thing that I like about Matt LaFleur, what he does for this Packers offense, is that we don't have a number one guy, and I don't think it's just about the talent. I think it's about how he schemes guys open. And so there's a few different guys open on every play. Jordan Love can really just pick the guy, as opposed to, okay, we have the number one. He's clearly who we're targeting, and that's who you have to stop. Defenses have to stop everyone.
Yeah. I don't know. It's the biggest thing, too, I think, with LaFleur is that I think a lot of fans were wanting Joe Barry gone, and were kind of, like, especially with the playoff run they made, they're like, he might stick around, and he didn't. He pulled the trigger. He let him go. brought in Halfley, who the guys just absolutely love. I think Keyshawn pointed out yesterday that Halfley's not afraid to go at LaFleur, and it's not kind of like just trying to one up him. It's just letting Halfley's more concerned about getting his guys ready and being the best defense in the league, and he doesn't really care who he crosses to get there.
Yeah, like and not going at him like verbally, like attacking him,
Yeah.
but like at practice, he's okay with blitzing him on third down,
Yeah.
and it's really bettering the offense and
Yeah.
defense.
My number 3 was Kyle Shanahan of the Niners. I mean, he has a lot of talent, and obviously that you can't just have talent, but you have to do something with it. And they're basically a shoe-in every year for at least the divisional round. They haven't gotten that Super Bowl. They've lost twice. 5 NFC championships. Or 4 of the last 5 NFC championships, and I think they've gotten there. But I think he needs to get that. They need to get that Super Bowl. If they don't, in the next couple of years, I think it's going to be just a huge disappointment for them.
Yeah, I agree. Number 3, I have Mike Tomlin of the Steelers. He has, like we talked about earlier, he has success with no matter who's on their team, and they've had some rough quarterback moves since Ben Roethlisberger, and they're still having a winning record. And I just think like hats off to Mike Tomlin. He also all the players love him, no matter who they are.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Mike Tomlin. Everybody wants to go play for him, run through a wall for him. Now, there is the impressiveness of always having won a season, but they have Russ now. They have a pretty solid team. I think they need to go and do something. Otherwise, he's going to start dropping on lists because you do have to be winning some playoff games. You do have to be winning championships, So hopefully he can get another ring, but he's still number 3.
My number 2 was Tomlin. Never had a losing season in 17 years, which is unfathomable. He hasn't really had, since Big Ben, they've just had this carousel of quarterbacks, and he's still been, they've been in the conversation. They haven't made the playoffs every year, obviously, but like you said, I think this year with Russ, they have to do something. Even if it's just win a playoff game, they have to do something. The defense, always great every year. I think TJ Watt helps a lot with that. But yeah, I think Tomlin is a guy that players love to play for because they know what he's about, and he's established a culture there in Pittsburgh that's hard to replicate. And my number 2.
My number 2 was Kyle Shanahan. Like you said, they do need to go win that ring because it seems like it's their time.
Yeah.
But they've had an incredible amount of success. Like you said, they're almost always in the NFC Championship game. And when they first started having their success, they kind of had a tough division. The NFC West was known as one of the better divisions, with the Seahawks at the time. The Rams were, probably the hottest team. So I think Kyle Shanahan's done a great job. He's really taken over that division, kind of taken over the NFC. They're probably known as the team to beat in the NFC, and that's a big credit to Kyle Shanahan, and he does a great job of... Brock Purdy wouldn't have the success if it wasn't for Kyle Shanahan. We can talk about the players, but Kyle Shanahan really got him ready, so hats off to Kyle Shanahan.
My number 1, Andy Reid, the Chiefs. Unquestioned, especially with Belichick gone. 11 conference championships and 3 Super Bowls. Back-to-back championships. They're looking for their three-peat. You can say whatever you want about Mahomes, but they don't have even remote success without Reid there. They got him in 2013. Like I said earlier, they haven't had a losing season. Just an offensive guru. He just knows how to win with that team, especially now with Mahomes, who's been there for 7 years. The chemistry is very Belichick Brady-like, where they know each other so well, and a guy that players love to play for. He defends his players when needed. He's hilarious. So I think, it's hard not to put Reid at 1.
Yeah, I also have Andy Reid at number 1. I think that a huge part of Mahomes' early success too was Andy Reid. I think that he does a great job of putting his arm around quarterbacks. He played quarterback himself, and so he really knows that position inside and out. And I also think, a lot of people were like, oh, what's going to happen to the Chiefs' success when Eric Bieniemy, goes and gets hired somewhere else, He was talked about as a head coaching candidate, ended up, being just an offensive coordinator and play caller, but they didn't miss a beat. One from, Bieniemy to Matt Nagy, and they're still in the Super Bowl winning rings. Andy Reid is, the main reason for their success. Yeah. And like you said, everybody loves playing for them. And a lot of people, especially when like Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, when the young coaches became so popular, people talked about like, oh, that's kind of what you need to do. When the older coaches, then they're less relatable. Andy Reid,
No.
everybody loves Andy Reid. He is so relatable, so playful, and I think you have to take this job seriously, but you can't
Yeah.
take it too seriously, and he does a great job of
Right.
balancing
Yeah.
that.
I think now that we're kind of on the subject of the Chiefs and I guess Mahomes, we're gonna get into just kind of our thoughts on where Mahomes is right now and kind of how he stacks up against just all of the legendary quarterbacks.
Yeah, where he ranks all time as of right now. Alright, so now we're going to get into where Patrick Mahomes ranks all time. And we're kind of looking at this as if, like, he retired right now. He never played a snap in the league. And obviously, it is hard, to compare quarterbacks all time based on the different eras. Based on it used to not be as much of a passing league. Now it is way more of a passing league and all of that. But still, you can still do your best to compare. So, guys like John Elway, Roger Staubach, Ben Roethlisberger, Troy Aikman, Aaron Rodgers, Dan Marino, Terry Bradshaw, Brett Favre. I have Patrick Mahomes above all of them, and that's incredible. He's been in the career, been in the league for such a short period of time, and he's already had so much success. And those are just Hall of Famers that I'm listing off, and he's already above all of them. It's incredible what he has done. Now, guys that I have above him: Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, and this one people can argue with me on. I could go back and forth on this, but I do have Steve Young above him, which I think Mahomes will surpass this year. People have talked about if Mahomes wins another ring, that then he could pass Tom Brady. Everyone talks about Brady having 7 rings, and they don't say anything else. But I'm going to get into Brady's resume a little bit, because we're disrespecting Brady by just naming the 7 rings. Obviously, 7-time Super Bowl champion. He's a 5-time Super Bowl MVP. He's a 3-time NFL MVP, 2-time NFL Offensive Player of the Year, NFL Comeback Player of the Year, 3-time First Team All-Pro, 3-time Second Team All-Pro, 15-time Pro Bowler, 5-time passing touchdown leader, 4-time passing yards leader, 2-time passer rating leader, NFL completion percentage leader, NFL 2000s All-Decade Team, NFL 2020s All-Decade Team, NFL 100th Anniversary All-Time Team. He has records for career quarterback wins, career passing completions, career passing attempts, career passing touchdowns, career passing yards, passing completion in a season, longest touchdown pass, career playoff wins, career playoff passing yards, career playoff passing touchdowns. It is insane what Tom Brady has done. You just go down the list of what Brady has done, and he has filled up the stat sheet. Now, you can say, oh, well, it's because he played for so long. Yeah. But Josh McCown also played for a long time. Yeah. He's not filling up the stat sheet like that. Even a guy like Aaron Rodgers played for a long time. He filled up the stat sheet some, but not like that. Tom Brady's success is incredible, so you cannot say that Mahomes has passed him. Joe Montana, he's a 4-time Super Bowl champ, where Mahomes is 3-time. He's also a 3-time Super Bowl MVP. Mahomes is also a 3-time Super Bowl MVP. Joe Montana is also a 2-time MVP, but he also got that NFL Offensive Player of the Year and a co-NFL Comeback Player of the Year. He's an 8-time Pro Bowler, and he has a few other stats. I won't list them all off, but if you ratio out, like the touchdowns and interceptions, Mahomes is like close to being on track, but not quite. Peyton Manning. Now this one's tricky because Peyton Manning only won 2 Super Bowls, where Mahomes did win 3. However, Peyton Manning is a 5-time NFL MVP, which is just absurd, wild. He's a 2-time Offensive Player of the Year, NFL Comeback Player of the Year. Here's a big one, Walter Payton Man of the Year, and I think when you win that award, that does put you in a different kind of status because that's the most important award. He's a 7-time First Team All-Pro, which is incredible. 3-time Second Team All-Pro. 14-time Pro Bowler, and he has a lot of records of, passing yards leader, passing touchdowns leader, pass rating leader, go down the list. And again, if you ratio out the touchdowns, Mahomes is behind where he should be. Because Mahomes is, 6 years going into 7th or whatnot of actually playing. Yep. Peyton Manning, he played for 17 seasons. If you ratio it out, Mahomes is technically behind where he should be in comparison to Manning, which is why I feel that I can easily put Manning ahead of Mahomes right now, even though Mahomes does have that one extra ring. Now with Steve Young, they both have 3-time Super Bowl champion. And Steve Young is just a 1-time Super Bowl MVP. He is the NFL Man of the Year, 6-time Pro Bowler, NFL completion percentage leader in '93. He was All Rookie Team in '89. He he just, I mean, he filled up the stat sheet, and again, if you ratio it out, Mahomes is a little bit behind. I think Mahomes will probably pass Steve Young in the next 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
but right now I have Steve Young above, but I am willing to make that argument. I also could make the argument of Terry Bradshaw putting Bradshaw above Mahomes because Bradshaw has 4 rings, where Mahomes just has 3. Now there is one thing. So right now you have, Brady, Montana, Manning, Steve Young, and then Mahomes would be at number 5. I have an asterisk though, because there's Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas. If you are including championships, Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas have more.
Yeah, but again, it's a whole different.
It's an era thing.
Yeah.
But it's NFL.
Yeah.
If you're doing Super Bowls, then Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas are not in Mahomes' rank. If you're including championships, then I think they're above him. You can debate the order. But that is where I have Mahomes. It's at number 5 with that asterisk of Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas.
So you listed a lot. I don't think Brady he will touch. I don't think we put him in that. I don't put him in that conversation until he gets 6, because 7 is. I don't think 7 unless once Mahomes gets 7, he'll top him because all the awards will come with. There'll be the MVPs, there'll be the All Pros, the first teams. But I think it's interesting to point out, like you said, 6 Pro Bowls in technically 6 years, because obviously his first year he didn't really play. But I think obviously Brady, Manning, Montana, those are guys he's behind, and I will die on this hill that Aaron Rodgers is the most talented thrower of the football that we will ever see, or we have seen that we will ever see. I think Mahomes can make those throws, but again, Super Bowls are important. They are, but I don't think they should be the end all be all. Rodgers has 4 MVPs. His touchdown to interception rate, he has thrown 100 interceptions in 20 years, which is ridiculous. He had that stretch from 2017 to 2018 to 2023 where he was just ridiculous. But I think right now, I do have him above Steve Young, and I would probably put him above Rodgers just because of the Super Bowls. But I think statistically, obviously, he just kind of hasn't played a lot, so it's kind of hard to put him um, up on those lists. But I think, like you said, when people put him one more, and then he's in the talk with Brady, I don't think he is, not even close. But you said Manning with 5 MVPs, maybe Mahomes can get there. But again, there's voter fatigue. There's a lot of things that go into it. But I do believe that if they win, but winning 3 more, I think that's not easy.
No, it's not easy. Winning 3 in general is not easy. And yeah, and the thing is, like we talked about before, Travis Kelce's going into his 12th year. We don't know how long he'll be around. Even if he stays around for a while, because tight ends, you can stay around for a little longer, that doesn't mean you're going to have the same dominance that you do. Also, all the other teams are also changing their defenses, their offenses. Other teams might be going on a little bit of a run.
Yeah.
They might win a Super Bowl here, which is just taking away their opportunity to win a Super Bowl. There's also injuries. There are so many factors that are going to go into that. Andy Reid, maybe he will stay for 10 more years, but he's also one of the oldest coaches in the league, maybe the oldest now that Pete Carroll's gone. So, I mean, he might leave. There's so many factors. Winning 4 more to tie Brady or 3 more to get close.
So do you think that it's any different, say, for example, if he three-peats this year, and then he 4-peats, and if he wins, because I can't remember how many Brady won in a row. Did he ever win 4 in a row?
Not 4.
So again, that's a conversation that obviously we're a while, at least 2 years away from happening. But I think even last year you kind of saw it with the Chiefs that they were kind of weren't kind of, I would say respected, but they're they're not what they once were. Mm-hmm. But then they won a Super Bowl. So I think there is a conversation to be had eventually. I think, like you said, the conversation is right now, if he retired today, I would put him at 4, maybe 5.
Okay.
So, but again, statistically, obviously passing yards and passing touchdowns, he's kind of down on the list. He's 65th in passing yards and 39th in touchdowns, but that's part of it, just he hasn't played that long. He's second in passer rating behind Rodgers, and he's tied for fifth in interception percentage. So I think we just need to see more. But I think what he's shown individually is how great he can be. But I think to whole Andy Reid thing is interesting because like when Belichick was there with Brady, he was a little bit younger. When Reid got there, he was a little bit older. So what if Reid does leave? I don't know if he would leave though. You know?
I mean, like right now, Reed's not going to consider leaving, but let's say the next 3 years they don't win a ring. They don't even make it to the Super Bowl. Then he might be like,
Yeah.
okay, I might have to hang it up. Like,
Yeah.
I'm 75. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're getting older. So.
Yeah, but I think kind of like you said, they have to at least be in the AFC Championship. You know, like you saw with Brady, to just be in the conversation with Brady because right now, obviously, Brady is the goat. He's at least not going to be touched anytime soon. I don't like Brady, but I mean, when Mahomes came in the league, I liked him because I was like, oh, he's a kid that's talented. He won Super Bowls early, and I'm like, hey, we could have this conversation with Brady, but then Brady won a seventh, and you're like, winning one outside of the Patriots. Obviously, he went to a team that I think they were basically good except for quarterback, so it was pretty easy to win a Super Bowl. But I don't think I just can't put him in that conversation yet until he even gets six.
I don't know if it was easy to win the Super Bowl, but I mean, he was in a good situation with
Yeah.
the Bucks. But I think, I think another thing is that like people always talk about Jordan and they talked about Brady, as these great athletes,
Mhm.
and Jordan won six, and then Brady won a seventh, and obviously that's a different league,
Yeah.
but he just really put himself in his own tier as like an athlete in general, as one of the goats. He is the goat of goats. You know what I mean? And so Mahomes has a lot of work to do
Yeah.
to get to the conversation with
Yeah.
Brady, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And so we're talking about where he's ranking all time, but people already are talking about Mahomes or Brady, and I think that is completely unfair.
Yeah,
I think it's
it's
completely disrespectful to Brady.
yeah.
And if he wins another ring, I still don't think you put
Yeah.
him in the conversation.
I mean, like you said with Brady and MJ, winning a NBA championship is it's hard to do, but compared to the three major sports, I would say it's probably the easiest because they're series. You know, in the NFL, you got one game. You got one game. You got wild card maybe, then you have division, NFC or championship, and Super Bowl. It's extremely difficult to win a Super Bowl, and I think we kind of take it for granted with Brady. He's a guy, like I said, I don't like, but I have an immense amount of respect for because what he did. If Mahomes does it, I'll be shocked. I don't think he gets seven. I don't even think he gets six.
Hmm.
But I don't know. It's a tough conversation to have because he's kind of a little bit like you said behind. If you ratio it out in some aspects, all team all pro. You said Manning had what 15 or
Manning had 15 Pro Bowls.
15 Pro Bowls. Mahomes has 6 in 6 years, so he's kind of on track. But like first team all pro MVP is interesting because, like you said, it's kind of a more of a passing league now. You have guys like, and then you have a guy like a Lamar Jackson that is going to be there every year, and then you have stars that will emerge. And Mahomes is obviously he's still I would say in his prime, but he's not rookie, not a second year guy. You know, he's a veteran essentially at this point. So.
And here's what I'd say: like right now, Mahomes has 3 rings, and so we're talking about like, oh, and he's won 3 rings in just a finite amount of years, so think of how many more he can win. However, if you're just looking at right now, other guys have won 3, other guys have won 4.
Yeah.
Now, if Mahomes goes and wins another ring, I think you can argue putting him over Peyton Manning. I think you can argue putting him over Joe Montana, depending on the other stats and what he does, or at least in the same conversation as Joe Montana. I can respect that.
Yeah.
But you still cannot put him in the conversation with Brady. Brady is in his own tier. Do not disrespect him. Whatever your feeling is on Brady or on Mahomes, you cannot disrespect Brady and put Mahomes in that conversation with just 3 rings or even with just 4.
I don't think you can put, like you said, if he wins one more, you can have the Montana conversation. I don't think you can have the Manning conversation yet. 5 MVPs.
Yeah, but then 4 Super Bowls compared to 2.
Yeah, and Super Bowls, I think they're measured more in the NFL because they're harder. Like we said earlier, CJ Stroud obviously looks at Super Bowls over. Rings over MVPs and other awards. But yeah.
And I will say that if you look at Peyton Manning's 2 Super Bowls, The second one, he was really right on the defense, and that is no disrespect to
Yeah.
Manning. He had a great career,
Yeah.
but Mahomes has been the Super Bowl MVP of all of these.
Yeah.
So I think you do have to kind of look at that. But again, Peyton Manning, like you said, the 5 MVPs, and he filled up the stat sheet. I mean, I read it off. He did
Yeah.
so much. So I think Mahomes would have to have another great season or two, make the Pro Bowls, make the All Pros,
Mm-hmm.
win the Super Bowl, maybe even win the Super Bowl MVP, and then I think you can be like,
Yeah.
okay, he can go over Manning. But again, Brady's not touchable right now, so don't
Yeah,
compare
yeah.
to Brady.
But again, we'll see how he does. Then this year with a three-peat, maybe after this year we'll see what happens, and we'll maybe revisit this conversation.
For sure.
But yeah, I think we're kind of on the same playing field that he's what fourth, fifth right now, and he's shouldn't be in the Brady conversation anytime soon.
Absolutely.
All right, I think that's it for this week's. Next week we're kind of still going back and forth on what we're gonna do, but we appreciate you guys all for watching, and we'll see you next week.